On the internet, I see young people complaining, doesn't matter what country they're from, that there's no opportunity. And I have to tell you, I'm a guy in my late 50s and I see nothing but opportunity. And I really wish I was a guy in my 30s instead of being in my 50s. These are whiskey barrels. We use them. We make a lot of whiskey here. We're about 14 months away from bottling whiskey, but in the meantime, we have to barrel whiskey. And where do you get whiskey barrels? Well, you get them at a cooperage. Barrels used to be used for everything, not just whiskey. My family, when back on the farm, my dad was still a kid, they used to take a barrel, they'd fill it with cabbage and salt and cabbage and salt, and they would make sauerkraut that they could eat all winter, ensure that they had some vitamin C. The last cooperage in BC was on Granville Island, and they continued to make barrels up until something like the 1950s, because everything used to be in barrels, and then, of course, the bottom fell out of the barrel market. But everything changed when a bunch of those cooperages shut down. There still continued to be a demand for whiskey barrels, and whiskey and wine is barreled. Now, the wood that they use is white oak, and in British Columbia, we don't have white oak. But a lot of white oak is grown in Ontario. But there is not a single cooperage in Canada, and there's a huge demand for these barrels. White oak is grown in Ontario and Quebec. White oak is grown on the east coast of the United States. There's tons and tons of white oak. It used to be that we nearly depleted all of the white oak, but now there's lots of white oak. And there are mills that mill white oak in Ontario, but nobody manufactures barrels in Canada. And you know what? We're not the only distillery that needs barrels. These are new barrels. We used to buy them from the United States. We're not buying them from the States anymore. Why? Because of the trade war. We have no idea what the tariffs are going to be. We have no idea what the cost is going to be by the time they actually land here. And we can buy used barrels. Used barrels are perfectly fine for making whiskey, but if you want to make bourbon style whiskey, you've got to use new barrels. And so we buy some new barrels for the sake of barreling something that we will produce that is closer to bourbon style. But my point here is there is a huge opportunity in this country right now for somebody who wanted to set up a cooperage. And it's not, terribly difficult to do it. I thought about it myself. What do you need? You need not a whole lot of equipment to be able to do it. You've got to be able to make these rings. Well, that's easy. Okay, there's people who can make those rings for you. These ones are made out of some sort of mild stainless, I think, but normally they're made out of just regular steel. You've got to cut your staves. You would do that now probably with a CNC lathe. You might want to use some sort of CNC cutting table. And then you've got to form them. That's, again, none of this is magic. This is all stuff that can be done. And then you've got to char the inside. Charring the inside is just basically burning it. So somebody could set up a cooperage in Canada and do pretty well. And if somebody was interested in doing it, I as a distiller would be looking at buying it as a product, and I have considered it myself, doing it myself. That's how desperate we are for barrels. And me and every other distillery out there are looking at it saying, well, look, we don't want to buy barrels from the US. We'd love to buy barrels in Canada, but somebody has to actually do it. And there's the thing. I have ideas for dozens of businesses that I could make a decent living in right now with relatively low setup costs. These are things that I think of. Why? Because it's the way my brain works. I know a lot of people's brains don't work that way. But the point is there's opportunity. There's so much opportunity in this country. You've got over 40 million people who are potential consumers for any product that you're producing. You've got industry across this country that manufactures, that is capable of producing the inputs that you need in order to do it. You've got a government that creates an environment where businesses can flourish, and it's just a matter of actually thinking about it and doing it. Now, there's a big difference though between thinking about it, coming up with the idea, and actually doing it, and that is where a lot of people fail. You have to follow through, and follow through is painful with any business that you're going to start or any business that you're going to create. There's so many opportunities out there right now. You could spend your time being a keyboard warrior, complaining on the internet about how this is, terrible Canadian government, and you want to leave and whatever. Or you could actually sit and spend some time thinking about, gee, what could I do that, what opportunities are available out there? What type of business could I create? Where could I find some employment in a field that interests me, that maybe I want to create a business later on so I can learn the trade? It's just opportunity. Opportunity is abundant in much of the world, but in Canada, it's just like stable government, stable democracy, stable currency, respected internationally, and consumers who have enough money to be able to, a little bit of discretionary spending to be able to spend. It's just opportunity. There's so much opportunity, and I really wish people would approach it with a different attitude, because it is all about attitude, and it's about follow through. And those are the two main things that I think where people fail. Lots of people have the ideas, but they don't have the follow through, and they don't have the attitude. And the negative talk all of the time that I see, all sorts of people are great at negative talk, gets you nowhere. You spend your whole life being negative, and you'll accomplish nothing. You'll wake up when you're 70 years old, and you will have just wasted your life. So to the young people out there's opportunity. Try and think differently about it. Spend some time every day thinking differently about it. Get off TikTok and start thinking instead, because I can tell you one thing I've discovered on TikTok is that I don't come up with creative ideas. I solve some things sometimes, but I don't come up with creative ideas. And spending your time on TikTok is not following through. Spending your time on TikTok is not accomplishing the things that you need to do if you want to turn an idea into reality.